Hello, everyone. Brad Hairston here. Welcome to Transform Now. My guest today is Tony Clark, the founder and CEO of NextWave Consulting in London. He is also the host of the very popular London Fintech Podcast, which has been running for 11 years and covers the dominant geopolitical influences over financial services, essentially in the UK and Europe. Welcome, Tony. Why don't you tell us more about yourself and also your consulting firm?
Thanks, Brad. Well, great to be here. And you covered a little bit of it. So I guess I'm a consulting founder and entrepreneur. I'm also the host of the London Fintech Podcast, which I've been doing for the last year. So credit to Mike Ballerman, who actually created that show. The first 10 years, the first decade was with Mike. But I'm privileged that I get to talk to some really interesting people from all across the sector on the show. It's not just UK and Europe, actually, it's global. So we've had CEOs from US firms on the show and very much really talking to the whole of the global sector on LFP these days. Now, I've worked with 20 of the world's leading financial institutions as a consultant, somewhere around that number. And I've been privileged to interview probably 30 founders and CEOs on the podcast so far and counting. So we do that every 2 weeks. It's quite fun to be on the other side of the microphone today.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's also great to know that you have a similar background to me. And like me, you spent the 90s working at Anderson Consulting, the predecessor to Accenture. Those were really interesting years, nonstop banking mergers and, just M&A everywhere. So I learned a lot during that era. I'm sure you did, although you were doing it on the other side of the pond. But
yes,
yeah, it's great to have you as a guest. Have you been a guest on many podcasts, or is this an unusual thing for you?
Usually the other side of the desk, but no, yeah. I've done a few. And normally it's about the growth journey for NextWave. We end up talking about sort of founding and scaling a consulting company. I think today, certainly ahead of the show, you said you were going to talk as much about what we're seeing in the fintech space and sort of what I'm learning in my conversation. So I think we might go a bit broader today. But hopefully I can come up with some good stories, Brad.
I'm sure you will. Okay, well let's talk about your consulting work in the current era of financial services in the UK. Where you've worked with a lot of different companies, as you said, many of the largest financial institutions. Where do you find most of these companies to be laser focused right now? I mean, can you share some observations from your consulting work?
Absolutely. Well, first up, sort of a bit of context. So NextWave is the consulting business, and that's really all about the next wave of transformation, next wave of technology, and next wave of modernization for the sector. And I came up with that name actually in August of 2019. We had our first consulting project literally in January of 20, and the whole world went into lockdown in March. So the next wave of the pandemic, of Omicron, of COVID, was, that was an unintended consequence of the name, but we were unusually topical for the first year and a half. And, what we've been doing is platforming and building that business out. So I do have a vantage point working. We're fortunate to have onboarded with some of the world's largest banks, or with investment managers, with insurance companies. So I have this great vantage point from the project work we're doing on some of the things that are at the top of agenda for those firms. What we're trying to do is really offer an alternative to the big brand consulting model. So many firms are struggling with their modernization challenges, but some of them have issues with the traditional consulting models as well. And they want smaller teams, more practitioner focused, great technology, faster delivery. And that's really what NextWave is all about as a specialist. So we're the sort of the upstart in the consulting space, and very much on the front foot with progressive technology. So with that context, perhaps unsurprising, the sort of projects we're doing are AI, automation, data platforms, fintech driven. Someone asked me right at the beginning, what is this new business? And I said, it's fintech consulting. And it's quite a nice label. We use a few other labels now, but I think that does encapsulate pretty much what we're doing. So to your question, what's hot? What have they got top of agenda? Well, what I would say is, first up, and this is true for every financial institution across the sector, fundamentally they're setting a business strategy, and what they're looking at is growth, efficiency, risk and control. And if you think about it, everything's in those three buckets, and sometimes more than one bucket, but they're always going to be looking at, how do we grow and scale the business? Do we go into new markets, new products? What do we do to drive efficiency and to drive operating margin? And can we do that through automation? And can we do it through smart platforms and processes? And how do we govern and control this business? So we start there. And then when you start to unpack it, we very quickly get into the space where there's an acute focus, for example, on fraud, on regulatory, on compliance, and that's on the risk control side of the equation. And that is very much a top three priority for pretty much all the clients we're working for. The climate and the environment we're working in, the risks and the threats from bad actors and from the cyber attackers that are out there, and the environment that we're working in are only getting harder. So, and at the same time, the sector is becoming, I say generally more regulated. In some areas, a little bit easing off the accelerator, but in others, more regulatory scrutiny. And it's always a push to evidence-based governance and control and data. So data-driven flows, data-driven controls, and automation. And at the same time, there's been a massive explosion in the opportunity and the uptake of generative AI. And what does that mean for a highly regulated sector? So sort of in a roundabout way, I guess I've covered it. It's sort of AI, automation, data, risk and control, compliance. These are all the things that our clients are focused on.
Interesting. Tony, do you find that more of your clients are looking to use automation and AI in the risk and control areas than they are in the growth areas? I heard you mention fraud and risk and I'm thinking of like KYC and AML and all those different areas. Is that where their attention has kind of really gravitated with regard to the opportunity to leverage AI?
Not really. There's an interesting stat out there. So on my pod show, and we haven't released this one yet, actually, but at the time of this recording, I think we're going to publish tomorrow. So when your audience get to listen to this conversation, the episode will be out. But I was talking to Scarlett Sieber, who leads strategy for Money 2020, and that's the world's biggest fintech conference. And they have 11,000 people in the Vegas conference. Interestingly, they're going to be doing their first one in the Middle East, and they've got 30,000 people coming to that for the very first one. Anyway, it's a big stage and huge representation from across the sector. And Scarlett said, we get thousands of applications to take a stage slot for people to stand up and do a piece on the stage in the various theatres, thousands. And she said 30% of those applications are all to do with fraud and AI. So yes, to your governance and control point, but equally, if you go to Innovate Insurance conference, I was I forget the exact label, we were at one of those earlier in the year. 2/3 of the theatre presentations there were all about AI and some agentic AI, and a lot of it was about underwriting and claims processing. And and then you look across the sector as to where advanced chatbots and agentic workflows are starting to be used. And a lot of it's about customer origination, onboarding, customer operations. So I think it's really across the patch. And there's also, of course, the advantage that Gen AI now gives for engineering and coding. And that's actually probably had the biggest material impact on the enterprises, is the productivity gains in the ability to take new products to market in the engineering side.
Yeah. Okay. Could you talk about governance and just the way that your firm works with your clients to help them establish the right governance frameworks and so forth around automation and AI? It certainly seems to be a big obstacle for many firms in terms of, doing as much with AI as they want to. And you read about issues all the time, with companies that have gone too far too fast and they didn't have the right guardrails or governance in place. So talk about that if you would. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing specifically in that area.
Yeah, so we're working on our clients really in the GRC space, governance, risk and compliance space. And we're, as with pretty much all of our projects, we're starting with what's the business problem that we're trying to solve here. And in many cases, it's coverage, throughput, speed, accuracy, and the AI tools that are now available do lend themselves very much to that space. Hence, the big conferences finding that there's a whole plethora of firms that want to come and talk about their particular offerings. I would say there's 2 or 3 sort of themes to the type of work that we're doing with our clients in the space. One of which is simply helping them unpack the ambition to move to an automated compliance or control function, and how do we do that? So sometimes that really comes down to functional decomposition and choosing the right platforms and solutions. How do we wire this in so that we become it becomes a set of automated workflow processes? Where's the smart place to put generative AI in those workflows, such that they're still following regulated guide rails in a highly regulated industry, and they can be explainable, but you get the advantage of generative tech in moving the whole process forward. So there's been some interesting work we've done essentially on future state model and architecture, choosing platforms, implementing those platforms. We're also working with our technology partners. So part of NextWave's capability in our model is that we have a tight alliances with there's 4 or 5 major tech firms that that are really our Lego bricks for the solutions we build for clients. So we can do the architecture and the advisory piece, but we actually build the solutions as well, and we do them on platforms like Camunda and ServiceNow and Quantexa and Alteryx, using their technology. And a lot of that technology has AI in the box. So you can now build agentic workflows in Camunda, for example, or you can use AI agent teams with the Alteryx technology to do some quite complicated data wrangling. We've built one for front office, back office reconciliation, a FOBO rec, which is common across the sector, using agent teams. And then sitting over the top, you have the challenge and question of how you're going to govern all of these AI components and AI applications that you now have in your organization. And quite a number of the platform providers are now coming to market with what they call AI control towers or AI gateways, which are really essentially governance solutions that sit over the estate. So you can have an inventory of all the AI applications that are running in your business, and you can link it to policy and process and model approvals and so forth, so that you can monitor what's being done and manage and case manage control issues and risks. So we're also working with clients on that. Actually, we're doing something again. Time of recording, we're going to be curating a breakfast meeting tomorrow morning with some of our European clients from I think about 8 or 9 institutions in the room. Breakfast session tomorrow morning with ServiceNow on their AI control tower. So and that's a very interesting piece of tech, because it just sits over the top of the workflow estate and the whole enterprise deployment of AI solutions. So kind of a mix of advisory and solution deployment what we're looking at the moment.
Yeah. And Tony, I forgot to ask you, but how many people in your consulting firm?
We're about 100 people globally, Brad. So we're kind of the upstart in the sector, in the sense that we're working for some of the biggest institutions, and the healthy competition is the world's largest consulting companies, but we're a relatively early stage.
Yeah. You get called a boutique, I'm assuming, by the market. At least that's how they would normally look at firms like yours. But there's a real value to that kind of company with a lot of consulting veterans, people like you that have done it for so long and bring a lot of experience to bear. So that's great. Well, let's transfer over and talk about the podcast that you lead, the London Fintech Podcast. I know it was started by someone else, as you said, like 11 years ago. And I think a year ago, you took over as the host. Is that right? Was it a year ago? Okay. What are some things you've learned from hosting so many fintech leaders in your time as the host? I've looked at I kind of tracked back through your episodes, and you guys have had some amazing guests on the show. So what kind of high level observations would you give just from, being at the helm and interviewing all of these individuals?
Well, where to start with the podcast? I mean, there've been so many learnings. It sounds like a simple thing. And and I was going to do something or look at doing a pod as part of marketing push for NextWave, in any case, when the opportunity arose to take on LFP. And so I thought, well, why not? But it's a little bit like the analogy I sometimes talk about is someone's handed you the microphone and said, you're now presenting breakfast television, off you go. It's over there. And don't lose the audience and make it interesting and all of those things. And suddenly you're a presenter, and particularly because we took the show from audio, so it was already on Apple and Spotify and the pod platforms, but invisible. And consciously thought, well, the big shows, the modern shows, that it's all on YouTube. So we like this format, we put it on camera. And then, and as you well know, suddenly you're thinking now about what do I wear, the lighting, how are we going to edit all of this? How do we make this fun with the guests? So that has been a very steep learning, and much steeper than I thought it would be actually. And it's still work in progress. I have a great friend who used to anchor one of the Sky TV news programs, and it is a professional journalist and broadcaster. And she just said to me, you've got to try and make it sound like a chat in the pub. Right. And I thought that was best possible advice, but the hardest,
just really good advice. Yeah.
But the hardest thing to do. And but I had the benefit of momentum and an existing brand and show. And once you uncover things, they'll sort of, get rolling. You realize that there's the show is quite well known. So I get approached once or twice, probably every day, by people who want to come on the show. And when I opened up Mike's inbox after we'd handed over the whole setup, and he said, look, you give it a few weeks, but when you've got a quiet moment, take a deep breath and have a look in the inbox. And there were 963 unread emails of people who wanted to come on the Fintech Podcast. And once I started sifting through them, some of it was just people trying to sell us podcast editing or recruitment or something, but 2/3 of it was real, and there were some absolute gems in there. I've had the international CIO of Bank of America on the show, and that was mainly his PR company reaching out, and so we get a lot of approaches. And what have I learned? Well, I've had some of the world's largest institutions. So we've had firms like Bank of America, FIS, Franklin Templeton on the show. And we've had startups like Transparently AI, where there's 15 people and a super innovative AI solution for a niche use case, in their case, forensic accounting. And there's a story there as well. I think universally, you want folks who are going to be chatty, have got lots of stories and have got something to say. That's a given. The institutions are all focusing on the things we talked about a minute ago, which are sort of top of strategic agenda. The founders have all got so many stories of overcoming adversity or knocking on 200 doors before they got their first sales lead, and some of the things that they're doing to bootstrap their businesses and everything in between. So it is it's now become a lot of fun, and I'm finding that it's sort of we're getting a little bit of a flywheel effect, because we've got some really good guests, and then we get more good guests, and I've got something I talked about last month that I can then sort of weaves into the conversation with the next episode. So watch this space. We've got 75,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Wow.
So I'm a YouTuber. I'm my kids amusement.
Yeah. When you've got more likes and more subscribers than your kids do, that doesn't happen every day, right?
There's a very funny story there, which was that if you actually watch London Fintech Podcast on video, it's now on video on Spotify as well, actually. So you can watch it on Spotify or YouTube, and you watch it right to the end, and you see the credits. And that's my 14-year-old Sam, who composed the music. So he does music. And when I took it on a year ago, it was around the same time, Dad, what do you think of this tune? I thought, I think I can use that. So the first thing he said to me was, I want royalties. And I thought, okay, fair enough. Very entrepreneurial. So I said a penny a download because it was quite niche audio audience at the time. And I thought, well, that's going to, a few tens of pounds and that should be fine. But then we took it to YouTube and the show popped and suddenly we've got this big audience and we were getting some of my episodes. I think the Lord Mayor of London, we just about nudged 30,000 views, right? So that's £300 to Sam for one episode. So, and the figures are public. So he's running a spreadsheet, rubbing his hands and going, Dad, you owe me £1,000. And if you don't pay him, I'm going to sue you.
Quite the entrepreneur. That's amazing. That's great. Now, did he create the music himself or did he use AI to do it? Because that's the trend.
He did it himself. He uses Logic Pro on the app. He's a drummer and he pieced it together and he's come up with some good tunes. And it just happens that that's one that's on the pod.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, one of your podcasts recently that really caught my attention was you had Rob Stone on, who's the GM of Intelligent Automation and Analytics at SS&C, where I work. And it was really good to see you talking to Rob. I'm not sure I believed him, though, when he said that was his first podcast. He looked way too comfortable and at ease. And, it was a great conversation to watch. So that was neat. As you've talked to all these fintech companies, we talked about automation and AI. What are some other areas of high interest and areas that fintechs are investing in that you've gleaned from all these conversations that we should also talk about?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brad. So AI is in everything, right? So we've talked about that a bit. But if you look more broadly across the sector, there's way more going on in insurance than most people think, right? So you think insurance is just a lot of spreadsheets, or some people might unkindly take that view, and that it's lagging the banking sector. But I think they've got a bit of a leapfrog opportunity. There's a lot going on around, agentic actuaries and automating flows for insurance claims and notifications of loss and underwriting. And there are actually insurtechs, quite well publicized insurtechs like Lemonade, who run a very AI first operation. They've got some really strong ratios and performance numbers through driving an AI powered insurance offering. So, and then if you think about where that sector is going to go next, it's all into telemetrics and wearables and vitality measurements and things that feed back into real-time insurance policies. So I think insurance is quite an exciting space. Crypto and crypto adoption is the other, for me anyway, the other mega theme alongside AI. And that's going mainstream. I've had some high profile guests on the pod talking about that. And we're seeing a lot more than just Bitcoin and smart contracts. We're seeing stable coins and every manner of DeFi and lending model, and token assets and tokenized funds and all sorts of things happening. And most importantly, the enterprises are paying attention. So there's regulation in the sector now under Genius Act and I think it was MiCA for Europe, and the institutions, 3 years ago, they were setting up Bitcoin trading desks, but now they're actually going mainstream on tokenizing other products and building out payments infrastructure and operating rails on blockchain tech, and doing a lot of partnerships actually with some of the blockchain companies as well. So that's huge. Buy now, pay later. So that's become a massive thing in the payments space. Klarna's are never out of the headlines. I saw that they filed for an IPO about a week ago. So they're sort of getting ready for that. So that's a big thing as well. And then powering all of this is the point I mentioned a few minutes back, perhaps, which is the Gen AI productivity boost for engineering and development. So the ability to build things. And I don't think anyone's quite vibe coding a brand, in financial institutions just yet. There's still things I think you need to do to make enterprise platforms resilient and sort of production ready at scale. but the ability to have sort of accelerated development is just driving masses of innovation and faster time to market across the sector.
Yeah, I was betting on you bringing up crypto because that does seem to be yet another area of new momentum, and certainly from the U.S. perspective, we're always watching Europe on the regulatory side because the U.S. or the U.K. and Europe have outpaced the U.S. in terms of regulatory moves and new measures that are being put in place. Do you see any areas where the fintechs in the UK and Europe are kind of keeping their eye on what's going on in the US? What's of interest to those firms that they're paying attention to? And it may be just as much about politics as it is about AI and entrepreneurial things going on. But what do you hear from your guests on that front?
Yeah, it's another great question. So I don't think the European uptake on crypto is at the scale of the US yet. And according to Money 2020 about this, I think for a period of time they were sort of dubbed Crypto 2020 because of the level of interest, and there was a queue out of the door at their Vegas HQ show, really on the strength of the US interest and take up in all things crypto. And the observation was they run the European show in Amsterdam, they don't get that much crypto focus. But I think that's changing. There is definitely an uptake in crypto ownership. I think it's something like 24% across UK residents now, and similar numbers across the European countries. And there are there's adverts on the London Tube, and if you go through Geneva Airport, then almost every advert is for crypto trading. And there's a younger customer base. This is about financial inclusion. It's about more institutional grade rails, the blockchains, and the global firms that are now pushing into the Eurozone as well. And of course, the regulations. So I mentioned, Genius is stateside, but MyCar for Europe is providing regulation for the sector. And that's then really opening up the field of play for European firms. And I think they are paying attention. So there are traditional financial institutions like BBVA in Spain, and with crypto custody services. StanChart is doing cryptocurrency services in Europe. JP Morgan Chase were very early in that everywhere. There's, as far as I understand it, AXA in France are testing blockchain for settlement. And then if you look at that's all the TradFi side of it, but if you look at the crypto native companies, then very many of the protocols and the venues have now got European licenses, and so Coinbase, Binance, and Kraken. This is all now available. And then you've got firms like Robinhood, who have, I think, had crypto offerings and products on their platform in the US for some time. But Robinhood recently come to the UK. Actually, I interviewed Jordan Sinclair, who runs Robinhood in the UK, exactly around the time of their launch. So you can get that episode up, and they see London as a real growth hub for their business. And they're going to be bringing many of these wider product offerings and crypto capabilities to the European market, particularly centering around the base in London.
Yeah, great. In general, Tony, how do you see the relationship between the big traditional financial institutions and the smaller fintechs evolving? Are they? Do you think they're more collaborative in the current era, or is it still about competition and just trying to stay afloat while all these new companies are continually popping up and poking at them? What do you see?
Yeah, I love this one. I see this from two angles, right? So I think as a consultant, and there's a nice phrase that one of my guests, good friend of mine, Niall Cameron, used a lot in the work that he does with fintechs. It's mice dancing with elephants, which is the fintech firms being the mice, of course, and trying not to get trampled by the major institutions that they're engaging with, and they operate at different clock cycles. So the fintechs can do things very quickly, and it takes 6 months to get a first contract signed off through procurement and hosting and the rest of it with major firms. That hasn't completely changed. I mean, I think some firms are better faster than others. We see it as a consulting supplier. That dynamic is not particularly helpful. I think there are sort of incubator programs and onboarding passports and things that have been looked at by the sector to try and accelerate the adoption of fintech by big institutions. So that's when, in the sort of client supplier relationship. But to your broader question about how the startups and the fintechs are rubbing up alongside the major institutions, I see it as co-opetition. So they competition, but there's also surprising sort of back to front models where, for example, big bank might have massive balance sheet and want to lend that balance sheet out, and fintech might have a property lending arm and a distribution network, and they do a deal whereby the bank puts a few million into the distribution business for the purposes of reaching a bigger client base and lending that money out. And HSBC did that with Lend Invest a few years ago, and there's lots of examples where they essentially integrate to take something to market. And the incumbents have the balance sheet and the scale and the global reach, and the fintechs have the agility and the innovative customer facing product and UX, and you can plug them together, right? So I think we're seeing some of that. We're seeing big institutions investing in fintech. So the big banks have for many years been sort of picking off through their venture arms, where do we want to invest? And we'll continue to see a lot of that. And then there's been talk of neobank disruption of the major institutions. Should we be worried about Monzo? Well, for a very long time, the answer was probably no. But now the answer is, maybe you should, because, north of 10 million customer accounts, and I think Revolut's the most valuable non-US fintech. I've probably got that wrong, but they've now got significant scale and really, and certainly in sort of mainstream banking, starting to threaten some of the majors. So, and the big institutions are trying to catch up. So, Bank of America, when I was chatting to them, it came out that they have 1,100 AI and machine learning patents. Patents for AI and machine technology, over 1,000. And they're trying to innovate it across the entire Bank of America technology community at enterprise scale. And this is all about listening to your customer, focus on customer, innovate the service product. So that push to modernize and stay relevant in a rapidly changing marketplace. You can see several of the major firms pushing really fast and hard to do that. JP Morgan's another. And Franklin Templeton leading on the crypto side. So, and they've got the advantage of lots of people, lots of money, lots of scale, lots of resources they can throw at it. And the challenge is, how do they become as agile, as innovative as the smaller firms who don't have the legacy infrastructure and all of that baggage. But I see it, I'd say, so long story short, for me, I think I see a bit of a convergence. I think the lots of competition models out there, and I also see perhaps the Venn diagram starting to overlap a bit more. And it's going to be very interesting to see which firms can stay on the front foot. It's a sort of race to stay relevant, because in this sort of always on, always public world, things can change very quickly. If you have a scandal, or you lose some money, or if you've got market leading product, the sort of viral effect of the uptake, or the slowdown in the inverse case could be really, really quick. So I think it's the market dynamics are something that we're still trying to get used to, and certainly the established institutions, I think, are finding a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Tony, it's been a real privilege having you on the show. I really appreciate you giving us a look into the world of fintech in the UK and where you are, but certainly you're addressing things that are going on globally, not just in your neck of the woods, but Really fascinating stuff. Thanks for being with us. And I wish you very much continued success with the London Fintech Podcast and with your consulting business. Thanks for being here, and I wish you well.
Thanks, Brad. I appreciate the opportunity for the conversation. I realized I didn't really mention SS&C. So you guys are doing an automation in the context of a very complicated investment management, investment operations, asset servicing business. And that actually, I think, is a great moat and a really strong place to be. So good luck with all things at SS&C as well. It's certainly never a dull moment at the moment. I think we're having a bit of a generational shift, and you and me both have got a very interesting vantage point for all of that, and love the opportunity to come and talk about it.
Perfect. Thank you